Hello and welcome to the first tutorial in the Minotaur Dialogue Tools tutorial series. Today we're going to be talking about branching dialogue. So if you load up the Minotaur Tutorials sample project, today we'll primarily be working in the Dialogue Tutorial subfolder, which contains everything that you need to complete the tutorial today. So we're going to be working in the Dialogue Tutorials scene. Go ahead and load that up, and the first thing that we're going to want to look at is these two NPCs that are in the scene. So in order to get conversations to trigger, we need a talkable NPC component on any entity. The only thing that this component requires is a character. Characters are a scriptable object that just represents a character. So we'll go ahead and make one of these now. So under Create, Minotaur, you're going to find New Character. Go ahead and press that. Go ahead and name this NPC A, because I'm awfully creative. And we'll go ahead and give them the arrow icon. This will show up in dialogue as their faceplate. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, create one for NPC B as well. NPC B will be a down arrow. So for each of these NPCs, you're just going to want to drag in their respective character scriptable object. That way conversations can be triggered of this character from this talkable NPC. Go ahead and save. Next, we're going to want to drag in our first conversation. So under prefabs, you'll find this base dialogue prefab. You can go ahead and drag this into the scene anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and do it under the conversations object. So you'll have this little warning right here when you first drag it into the scene. This is just because it is still a prefab and Unity Visual Scripting doesn't know what to do with that. So we're going to go ahead and unpack this from the prefab. There it goes. So to get started here, we don't need to worry about this. Just need to go and hit Edit Graph. And then you can double click on the larger graph to dive into the conversation itself. If you go full screen, you will get an error from Unity Visual Scripting. Don't worry, this is just Unity Visual Scripting and it doesn't do anything. So when you first open up the conversation graph, you will see something like this. A simple branching conversation set up visually. We'll walk through each of the components now. So the conversation subgraph holds the information for this conversation specifically. It has important information like what character this conversation belongs to, the priority of the conversation, whether it's repeatable, and under what conditions it is allowed to trigger. We won't be going into detail on the conditions in this tutorial, but will in a later one. For actually displaying lines, we use dialogue subgraphs. So these are triggered when the flow is entered, and it always triggers from this conversation subgraph. It requires a character who will be representing the speaking character, what they say, and choice text, which is only used in branching choices, like here. You will need to create a list that is the same number of elements long as the number of choices that you have. Then you can split the flow into each of the choices. Just make sure that the choice text is lined up in order with the text list here. otherwise it will not display correctly. Then at the end here, we have a raise basic SO event, call on the dialog and scriptable event. So to get this set up, let's go ahead and make a conversation for NPC A. So NPC A will go ahead and start the conversation off by saying hello to the player. Then we'll be confronted with a decision to make. So we don't actually have a character for the player yet, so I'm going to go ahead and create that real fast. And we'll give them an astronaut, an astronaut jump icon. So going back to the script graph here, we can assign these choices as something the player would say. Say the player can say hello to you too. And since it's a short enough choice text, we can go ahead and just have that be the line text as well, and vice versa. Or we can say, hello, my day has been particularly good. How has your day been? Which we can just say, change to hi as a choice text. These two do not have to line up. This will just be what is displayed to the player, and this will be what happens when the line actually enters. And we're done here. Since both of these branches end in raising the dialogue end event, if they didn't, we would have to make sure that this occurs to terminate the conversation. Alright, now backing out of here, we can go ahead and walk over to our NPC and try this out. Wait for the script graph to load. And now we can observe the flow of the conversation here while we're playing up here. So we'll walk up to this NPC, press E to interact. Notice that down here we have entered the first dialogue subgraph. Now we're going to progress into the choice, which will display our two choice options. I'm going to go ahead and select hi, which has brought us down into this subgraph here. Now, once this completes, we are going to continue, which will end the conversation. That does it for today's tutorial. I hope this has been helpful, and next we will cover writing barks.